Welcome into the Husker247 Postgame Podcast. Nebraska 14-7 winners over Rutgers. I am Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz here on Saturday after Nebraska's win moves them to 5-1 on the season. An ugly game, but still a winner. Bruntz, give me your biggest takeaway from Nebraska's 14-7 win over
Rutgers. Nebraska's defense carried the day when it had to. The conversations that happened, I guess, post-Illinois, was that fair? About kind of questioning where Nebraska's defense was. And, I heard a lot about
Started with Northern Iowa.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think they answered the bell. And, I mean, you look at what they kind of overcame tonight, and this was the first time this season that Nebraska's defense has really, multiple times had its back against the wall and answered the bell every time. So that's got to be the biggest takeaway is the defense won the game. I mean, if you would have, said that, the Monangai was going to have 70 some yards in the first quarter and not get to 100, I wouldn't have believed you. What did it take Rutgers? Six tries from inside Nebraska's 2, and they still didn't get in. I mean, there was some really good, solid defensive play in that game. And I think you were kind of waiting all year for what the next step looked like for the defense from last season. And I think that was a pretty good example of it. How about you?
I want to kind of to build off of what you just said there. In a lot of ways, that game, now that I'm thinking about it, is kind of similar to last year's Friday game against Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Nebraska had some big defensive stops early in the game. They were able to turn back Illinois. The offense had opportunity after opportunity to continue to add to the lead and kind of put the game away. Wasn't really able to do it. The defense kind of stepped up when it needed to, got off the field when it needed to. Just kind of an ugly game. And Nebraska won that last year against Illinois. They won on Saturday against Rutgers. I would say for sort of a different spin on it, I really can't remember another game where Nebraska's punter was as valuable as Brian Buschini was today. He's had some games in the past where he's had some big kicks and he's dropped in some important punts. He's had to make tackles in his time at Nebraska. But for a guy who got absolutely and utterly demolished on his first punt attempt to the point that he's just laying there on the ground and it looks like, one of those old Looney Tune Road Runner, Wile E. Coyote, like a piano got dropped on him. Like if he would have looked up and his teeth had fallen out of his mouth. Like that's what it looked like after the punt got blocked and he was just laying motionless on the field. If you would have told me that guy was going to be the most important part of Nebraska's win, I wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have believed it before the game. I wouldn't have believed it after that punt was blocked. I don't know that I would have believed it until I watched him throw a beautiful 30-yard fake punt pass with the wind and then sort of discuss in postgame after about how Rutgers doesn't cover anyone after the initial 10 yards, so they knew that they had this. So then they snuck out at halftime and were practicing the play at halftime on their practice field where nobody could see him, so nobody knew that this was coming, so he could get the throw down. I mean, just wild stuff, and that's just nothing of a couple massive punts that helped flip the field. I mean, just a huge game from a punter coming from the most maligned part of the game for Nebraska in terms of special teams. Just never saw it coming. Never saw it coming at all.
Yeah, I mean, you could have made a lot of money before the game if you would have said that Brian Buschini would be the leading passer for Nebraska in the second half and Nebraska would still win. Like, I mean, that's kind of what we're dealing with. I mean, the punt, he had the 61-yarder with the into the wind. I mean, I don't know that people can appreciate how difficult that wind was today. I mean, it was really whipping. It was kind of swirling, as it tends to do in Memorial Stadium. But he had the big punt, the 61-yarder that kind of flipped the field, and then the 69-yarder at the end. I mean, it was a nice kick. It really kind of, I think, kind of let the tension out in the stadium a little bit, because you know how things are at Nebraska. You can feel it's like the pucker levels up to 100 in there.
A lot of clinching.
A lot of clinching, a lot of diamonds being made. But yeah, I mean, it's like that kick was great, and it kind of allowed Nebraska's defense in an obvious passing situation to pin its ears back and get after Rutgers quarterback. So, as bad as the special teams were, and to get 2 punts blocked, and not just blocked. I mean, like they were
Demolished.
Yeah, he really did some nice things, and that comes on the heels of the Purdue game where he made 2 really key tackles, got some snaps down for a kick to even be attempted that probably shouldn't have been. So I mean, he probably deserves a helmet sticker or 2 for the job he did. I mean, we haven't gotten to the offense yet, but I mean, what do you make out of Nebraska's kind of, I think in the second half, not today, but in other games, I think that they've kind of tended to kind of try to let the air out a little bit. I mean, they're not going to put the ball in a bad spot or whatever, but that was the first kind of stretch, I think, today where you saw Dylan Raiola look a little bit mortal. You know what I mean? Like, what did you kind of make of the second half and what Nebraska was trying to do? Because it was hard, even though it felt like being up 14-0, you're up 28-0.
It was one of those where, I would love to be in the film room, just kind of listening to the discussion, because there was some plays that they dialed up in the second half where they had the really high percentage easy throw, and he just chose not to make them. Like I've said to you, I think a couple times now, like I'm still somewhat flabbergasted. You run the play where Janiran Bonner comes across the formation, and it's just supposed to be a quick dump off to him, and he's running forward, and at the least you're trying to get 5-6 yards to set you up for a third and manageable. And it's quite possible he could have picked up 25 yards, and you're in the shadow of your own goal line. You want to really avoid that third and long, and he passed on that, and then tried to fit like a tight window throw kind of off his back foot. He seemed very uncomfortable throughout the second half on Saturday. There was the Ja'Cory Barney play that was dialed up on their last offensive drive where they were running plays. That was very confusing because it was right there. I mean, if he gets that ball out right away, they have, I think, a first down. I mean, and so, they put together a series of plays to make easy, manageable throws for him. And he was kind of off. And he started the game 6-9. And then from that point forward, I think completed 7 of his last 28 passes. And so just a really ugly game all the way around for Dylan. But you gotta move forward, and we'll see kind of what he looks like after the bye. If he's a little bit banged up, if it wasn't, just a good day or whatever it was. But it was good that Nebraska was able to win a game where he was a net negative, really. I mean, you weren't able to rely on him to go and get you another score to go back up 2 scores in the second half. He couldn't make some of those throws. So they had to win through their defense. They had to win with, believe it or not, special teams. They had to finish a football game on the field. All these things that we've talked about, it happened, and they're better off for it, even as ugly and as gross as today probably felt for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's interesting. Matt Rule mentioned this, and some other players, I think without knowing that Matt Rule had talked about this, they mentioned the physicality and the way that they practiced this week. They were hitting earlier in the week. They were going full out. I mean, they do anyways, but there was more intensity to it this week. And I don't know if that's because it's Rutgers is on the schedule. Like you basically know if you're playing Rutgers, you're probably in for a 4-quarter just street brawl, for lack of a better word. And I think that kind of approach to this game, I think, helped the defense the most, because when you kind of get into the statistics, I mean, there's some really good things, but there's also some things that generally you would look at and say, I bet Nebraska probably lost this game. I mean, they played on a tilted field. the entire game. This is the first time this year where I think Northern Iowa had like a yard difference on average starting field position. It was closer to 15 yards today. Special teams played a role there. I think you had 10 total yards in the fourth quarter. 10 total yards in the fourth quarter, 45 in the third quarter. There were a lot of things that they had to overcome, self-inflicted in some situations, but I mean, you saw the guys that on defense that you needed to have show up. I mean, Ty Robinson played a really good game. You saw Nash Hutmaker make plays with more consistency for the first time, I think, this year. Deshaun Singleton had that big tackle on the pass play on the goal line Ty Robinson said that was one of his favorite plays that he's, seen at Nebraska or been a part of at Nebraska. So you had a lot of those. John Bullock played another solid game. The veterans that needed to kind of be there to win a game like this, they did. And I think a lot of that came from the tone that was set in practice this week. And that's not to say anything of a guy like James Williams, who is kind of turning into a little bit of a closer where, if an opponent is passing, you feel okay about his ability to at least, harass him a little bit. And he certainly, had a really nice second half tonight.
Yeah, he had a really good second half. And you could feel in those last couple drives, like Rutgers were getting worn out with how quickly he could come off of the edge. He was forcing, you think about how you pass rush in tandem. If James Williams is able to get upfield the way that he is, and it forces Ethan Kaliakmanis to step into a pocket that then includes Ty Robinson or Nash Hutmaker or, Riley Van Poppel was in, or whomever it is coming through that gap too. So there's really nowhere to go. And so he, I mentioned that Dylan didn't look comfortable. I mean, Ethan rarely ever got to throw flat-footed or a time throw. I mean, he had a couple that were pretty nice on the day, but James Williams was a big part of that. A couple guys, I think you mentioned Marquise Buford. He had a good day. He had the interception. He had the pass breakup on fourth down. And then Sierra Wright, I mean, this is the third straight week that we're just kind of talking about him. I mean, he had the interception today, made a great play. Getting to the ground, picking off a pass, holding on to it, set up Nebraska with tremendous field position that they would not be able to take advantage of. But Bruntz, I'm salivating at the idea of Wright and Hill playing opposite of each other as Nebraska gets into Indiana and Ohio State and USC down the line. I mean, three teams that you think are going to be able to throw the ball a little bit. You have a couple cover corners that could make life a little bit difficult. Then you get James Williams coming off the edge with Prince Uman or MJ Sherman and Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker coming up the middle. I mean, you can paint a pretty vivid picture for this Nebraska defense to continue to play well, even as the competition is going to make a big jump here with what Indiana's been doing and Ohio State is doing.
Yeah. I mean, we're heading into the bye week. The 24-hour rule, I guess, you get to continue to talk about the win for 24 hours. I mean, how are you feeling going into this bye week about this team relative to kind of what you thought? I mean, I think I said 5-1. I had different wins and losses, I think, for where they stubbed their toes. But I mean, how does this kind of strike you? I mean, it hasn't been pretty by any means, but I think there's definite progress being made, although some big things need to be taken care of during the bye week if they can.
Yeah, I mean, I thought 5-1. I thought the one loss would be to Purdue, and it was to Illinois, and they've won the rest of the games that I thought that they would win. I think in a lot of ways they're playing a very Big Ten football style and a lot of Big Ten football games. I mean, as much as you don't want to say to get used to a 14-7 game in which you don't score after halftime, like they've seen their brethren inside the conference do this year in and year out and stack wins that way. I just don't, it would be easy to say that Nebraska hasn't played a complete game yet and that's still coming. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think that they're going to be relying on this defense. I think that their passing game has kind of stalled in some ways, or they're going to have to kind of go back to the drawing board to kind of figure some things out. I think that Dylan Raiola is going to have some more ups and downs. This is really the first valley that we've experienced for him so far through 6 games, which is remarkable. Like, it shouldn't be viewed as oh man, he didn't play well, what does that mean for going forward? It should be viewed, man, he played 5 pretty fantastic games until he had a stinker. And, now he gets a week off and he gets time to assess and let his body heal a little bit. And let's see what this looks like when he comes back here in a couple of weeks against Indiana for a critical road game. So I think the chance of still winning, 9 games, I think there's a chance that they can still put some fear in somebody like USC or Ohio State, with those away games. I think they have an opportunity to win their final 2 home games with UCLA and Wisconsin. I mean, it's all right there. It hasn't looked exactly how I thought it would, but they're a competitive team, and I think they're going to be a competitive team between now and the end of the year, whenever that is.
What was tonight progress, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they closed out a game on the field. Here's what I find difficult whenever we have these conversations, and it's not necessarily you, it's not anybody specifically, but we always build up teams like Rutgers or,
Yeah.
by the time Nebraska plays Indiana, that is going to be the best football team that has ever played in the state of Indiana. It doesn't matter what Notre Dame's ever done, doesn't matter what Purdue's ever done, doesn't matter what the Colts have ever done. Curtis Rourke is going to be Peyton Manning incarnate. Tyson Lawson is going to be Edgerrin James. Like, this is what we do. We build the other team up into some behemoth. Kyle Monaghan was the greatest running back that Nebraska fans had ever seen. How the hell are they ever going to slow him down? He ran for 78 yards. And this was the best running. Like, this Nebraska defense, it's so overrated. They're never going to be able to do anything. He ran for 78 yards on 19 carries. Like, either you give them credit for that, or we stop doing the building these opponents up if you're going to shit all over the win on the back end of it. So, I mean, I didn't know that I had this rant in me, but it's 9:08 here. And some of it is like, I just like, why do we have to, well, it looked good, but it was against UTEP. They beat up Colorado in the first half, but it's Colorado. How good are they going to be? How good is this defense? They haven't played anybody. They play an Illinois team that's probably better than most people think, but Nebraska sucks. They're bad. Their defense is a fraud. The first half of this game, the first quarter of this game, you go through our game thread on the message board. Defensive fraud, pathetic. They look terrible. Tony White's being out coached. Rutgers offensive coordinator's doing anything he wants. Like, man, the perspective is just lost sometimes. And then it's like Nebraska goes and wins the game, and it's like, it's ugly, it's terrible. You shouldn't feel good about it. Is there actually progress? I don't know. I think we have to pick a side. I think that's where I'm at. And the side that I'm on is wins are better than not wins. And this is a very incomplete football team that is figuring out how to play the opponent and play through their own mistakes every Saturday that they take the field. That's where I'm at.
No, that's fair. It's I don't know. And especially when you've seen any number of, like, when you've had the conversation about being the best 3-9 team in the country, you probably need to at least entertain the fact that there's progress to be made in winning 14-7, and what was a very hard fought football game between 2 good but very flawed teams. Like, I think that's the thing that becomes clear with each passing day, is that there are many, many flawed football teams in college football, and Nebraska happens to be one of them. They're going to play a lot of them, a lot of other flawed teams this year, and it's okay to feel okay about a 14-7 win and not apologize for it. Where, where the stat box says you probably shouldn't have won, or at least it was certainly not aesthetically pleasing, but you still found a way. I mean, there's it's hard winning football, as we've seen at Nebraska for 10, 15 years. So to go into a bye week 5-1 with, a pretty good chance to get 8 or 9 in front of you, that feels pretty different.
Yeah. And I don't want people to misunderstand me. I think that Nebraska can be a lot better than how they played today. But But at the same time, I think if you just pull yourself out and look where they were a year ago and look where they are now, and you're 5-1, and you did it against what was the easier portion of your schedule. Now you've hit the bye week. Other than if they had taken care of Illinois, and here's the thing, I thought Nebraska played poorly and still should have won that game. Like, so it's like, which would you rather have? You play poorly and you lose, or you play poorly and you're still able to come out with a win because you do just enough right. Like you take the win every time. So I think this team can still win 8 games. I think this team can still win 9 games, but they've got to get better in some areas. I think they have to figure out the running game to a degree. I think it's more evident to me now, 6 games in, that their offensive line just isn't able to line up and run people over. But can you scheme enough? Can you have enough interesting plays? Can you do enough to put yourself in position to be able to run the ball for 160 yards a game? I mean, again, that's not fantastic football, but if you take out the sacks, they ran for about 130 yards on Saturday, which is pretty efficient. The thing is, if you pair that with what you expect for 270 yards through the air, Nebraska runs away with this game. For whatever reason, they couldn't throw on Saturday. And so it'll be interesting, I guess, more than the run game to me, is if Nebraska's passing game is now off track, or if it was an aberration because of the weather and a freshman having a bad day.
Yeah, no. Well, there's going to be lots of time to sift through that, but easier to do it after a win. But it felt like, talking to players after the game, that they weren't saying that they wanted to buy, but like it feels like some guys are pretty beat up over there. Like I think it's coming at the right time.
I also think, I'm curious, we don't talk about this a lot. I also think there's just like the mental side of it. Like every week, and especially when you play in the type of games like they have, the first half against Purdue and then the game against Illinois and this game against Rutgers, like you carry a lot of pressure right there. And so I wonder if, the mental side of things, if that's also something good that comes out of this first bye week, is you get a chance to decompress for a few days, not go away, not, do nothing, but decompress, and you don't have that opponent waiting for you on Saturday. You know what's going to be waiting for the people on Sunday? Probably mid-morning-ish, maybe even noon. It's going to be Michael Bruntz taking the wheel of the Sunday side session. I won't announce the guest. I will let that surprise the folks when the podcast drops. But I'm out. I'm taking a couple days away from Nebraska football to go blow my son's college fund in the land of Las Vegas. But Michael Bruntz has you taken care of, and BC has you taken care of. Husker247. Husker247.com has you taken care of. So be sure to check out everything we got going on the site. I'll be back midweek. We'll be rolling with plenty of bye-week content. There was quite a few recruits on campus here today, quite a few recruits that have been here so far this year. So a lot of stuff to cover there, a lot of things going on with Nebraska football. Might be a bye week, but it's never slow at Husker247. So for Michael Bruntz, I'm Mike Schaefer. Appreciate you listening to the postgame podcast here. We'll catch you later with more Husker247 content.